The skies over Earth darkened as the Xarvok fleet descended, their ships resembling monstrous, sleek war machines, each one larger than anything humanity had ever seen. From the moment the first ship broke through Earth's atmosphere, a wave of dread washed over the world. The ships hovered, suspended like predatory birds of prey, blocking out the sun and casting eerie shadows across every continent. The planet seemed to hold its breath. At first, humanity thought it might be a natural phenomenon, a comet, maybe, or an asteroid. But as the massive structures began to move, as their red eyes blinked to life, and their metal exteriors shimmered with an unsettling energy, it became undeniable. This was no accident. The Xarvok had come. From their command ship in orbit, Supreme Commander Vornak issued a broadcast that immediately cut through all channels. His voice was smooth but cold, the tone of someone who had conquered countless worlds with ease. "We are the Xarvok. You have been chosen. Surrender your planet. Comply or face extinction. Your resistance will be futile." His words reverberated across Earth's cities, through speakers in homes, and on televisions and phones. Governments scrambled for answers, but it was already too late to stop the invasion. The world was paralyzed by the sheer scale of what was happening. Panic set in as humanity faced its first true existential threat. World leaders from every corner of the globe attempted to form a united front, but their efforts were disjointed and ineffective. Lines of communication fractured as fear and uncertainty spread. The usual political games evaporated, leaving only raw, unbridled terror. But in the midst of the panic, there were sparks of defiance. The broadcast from Vornak didn't just cause fear, it also ignited something else, something deep inside humanity. The idea of surrender seemed impossible to fathom. The invaders hadn't even landed yet, and already humans were gathering. In every country, in every city, people were beginning to act, not as governments or soldiers, but as individuals united by one single thought: survival. In the streets of New York City, a group of engineers and hackers gathered in secret, forming an underground network. They immediately began to discuss how to jam the Xarvok's communications and gain control of the satellites. Meanwhile, in London, military veterans from all branches of the armed forces, some retired for decades, joined forces with active duty soldiers, planning their first resistance. In Paris, citizens took to the streets, organizing civilian defense groups and stockpiling whatever weapons they could find. Across the globe, pockets of humanity began to organize. Governments may have fallen into confusion, but the human spirit had not been broken. Each person, no matter their background or training, believed in the one thing they all had in common: Earth was their home, and they weren't about to let anyone take it from them without a fight. As the first Xarvok ships began to descend toward Earth's cities, humanity's response was anything but surrender. A lone hacker, working in the quiet darkness of his apartment, hijacked a broadcast signal and sent out an encrypted message: "We won't give up. We will fight back." It wasn't just a message of hope. It was a declaration of war. As the shadows of the invaders loomed closer, humans everywhere began to understand one thing: that Xarvok had made a grave mistake. They had thought humanity was weak. They had underestimated the one force that had allowed Earth to survive for millennia: its people. And now, they would learn that Earth would not go down without a fight. The world was in chaos, but amidst the panic, something remarkable began to unfold. In every corner of the planet, from the tallest skyscrapers to the smallest villages, humans began to come together in ways they had never done before. The Xarvok, towering in their power, thought they were dealing with a fractured species, divided by politics, culture, and resources. But they had made a crucial mistake. The true strength of humanity was not in its governments, but in its people. In a small apartment in New York, a group of tech-savvy engineers huddled together, their fingers flying over keyboards as they worked to hack into the Xarvok's communication grid. One by one, they breached firewalls, bypassed security systems, and began to understand the aliens' language of signals. The resistance was born in the shadows of the internet, not in government halls, but in the minds of ordinary humans who refused to back down. In London, former military personnel, men and women who had seen the worst the world had to offer, stood shoulder to shoulder with civilians. Armed with only their training and the desperate need to protect their homes, they began to build makeshift defenses. They weren't waiting for orders from any leader. Instead, they created plans, dug into their cities, and set traps. The resistance was growing, fueled by the undeniable will to survive. Across the globe, the same scene was unfolding. In Paris, a group of university students, armed with little more than old military textbooks and a shared sense of urgency, began assembling improvised weapons. They didn't know the intricacies of advanced warfare, but they knew how to use their environment. They transformed the streets into mazes of barricades, turning their city into an unrecognizable fortress of resistance. But it wasn't just the professionals and the tech-savvy who joined the fight. Ordinary citizens in every country, people who had never held a weapon in their life, rallied. Farmers turned their plows into battering rams. Mechanics pulled apart cars and trucks to create armored transports. People who had once lived in isolation, or who had never thought of themselves as fighters, suddenly found themselves at the heart of a battle they couldn't ignore. While the Sarvok underestimated humanity's resourcefulness, they also believed that their advanced technology would be enough to quell any uprising. From their massive ships hovering over Earth, they sent down waves of soldiers, confident that their superior weaponry and firepower would snuff out any resistance before it even had a chance to begin. But the Sarvok were wrong. The first waves of invaders found themselves caught off guard by the sheer unpredictability of humanity. Their weapons were powerful, yes, but humans had something they didn't: ingenuity. The invaders tried to land their forces in major cities, only to find themselves caught in a barrage of homemade explosives, traps set by desperate civilians, and ambushes they never saw coming. In the streets of Beijing, the Sarvok were met by a wave of human-made drones, cobbled together from everything people could get their hands on. The drones, while rudimentary compared to Sarvok technology, had one advantage: the element of surprise. Humans used every resource available to fight back, no matter how small or ineffective it seemed. Every scrap of technology, every piece of knowledge, was used in the battle for survival. The Sarvok soon realized that Earth was not the unorganized, weak planet they thought it was. They were met with resistance at every turn, and every victory they claimed came at a heavy price. Their forces were dwindling, while the fire in humanity's heart only seemed to grow brighter. And as the battles raged on, one thing became clear to both sides: this was no longer a war for territory. It was a war for Earth, and humanity wasn't going to give up without one hell of a fight. As the weeks passed, the Sarvok's overwhelming technological advantage began to show cracks. Their ships still loomed over Earth's cities, their powerful weapons causing devastation wherever they struck. But something unexpected was happening on the ground. Humanity was fighting back, not just with sheer numbers, but with something the Sarvok had failed to account for: an endless well of innovation and resilience. In the mountains of the Rocky Range, a group of archaeologists and engineers stumbled upon an ancient discovery. While scavenging for resources, they uncovered an old underground network, a remnant of a long-forgotten civilization. It had been buried deep within the Earth, its existence all but erased from history. At first, they thought it was just another forgotten relic, but as they explored further, they realized it was much more, far more advanced than anything humans had ever encountered. It wasn't just a system of tunnels or forgotten technology. It was an intricate network designed to protect Earth from outside threats. The complex machinery, dormant for millennia, was powered by a system of geothermal energy and designed to defend against invaders. It had been built long before the rise of modern civilization, but its purpose had remained a mystery until now. Excited and terrified by their discovery, The group quickly contacted the resistance. Once the news reached global leaders and military commanders, the search for the lost technology became a priority. Humans from all over the world began to converge on the site, pooling their knowledge of ancient texts, advanced science, and engineering to activate the dormant defenses. At the same time, the human resistance had begun to tap into a new wave of strategy. With the Sarvok's advanced technology, they could never hope to match them head-on in terms of firepower, but they could adapt, using their environment and the unexpected weapons at their disposal. In cities like Tokyo, Sydney, and Rio de Janeiro, civilians continued to mount guerrilla operations. Every successful sabotage attack on Sarvok supply lines was met with cheers and hope. Every downed enemy ship or crippled war machine added fuel to the fire of humanity's spirit. Meanwhile, the Sarvok commander, Vornak, began to grow increasingly frustrated. He had expected the human resistance to falter. He had expected Earth to fall within weeks, just as the countless worlds before it had. Instead, his forces were being harassed and hindered at every turn. Their supply lines were cut off, their ships were being ambushed in space, and every attempt to secure the planet's major cities had been met with increasing resistance. Worse still, the humans were learning fast. The Sarvok had underestimated their ability to adapt, their capacity for turning their weaknesses into strengths. In a secure command room aboard the Sarvok flagship, Vornak paced, staring out at the Earth below. His advisors whispered among themselves, offering suggestions. Some suggested harsher tactics, urging him to destroy entire cities in retaliation. But Vornak hesitated. There was something unsettling about humanity, something unpredictable. If the humans were capable of uncovering forgotten technology beneath the surface of their planet, what else were they capable of? And then, just as Vornak was about to give the order to escalate, something unexpected happened. A message, broadcast to every corner of the Earth, appeared on every screen, regardless of location or medium. It was the work of the human resistance, and it shook the Sarvok to their core. The message was simple, yet powerful. You have sealed your doom. The words were not just a declaration of defiance. They were a challenge. The message echoed across the planet, becoming a rallying cry for every human still standing. It signified more than just hope. It signified the dawning of a new chapter in the war. The human resistance wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something much larger, Earth's freedom. They had found their strength, their purpose. The invasion had ignited something deep within humanity, and now they were no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The Sarvok commander stared at the message, his face twisted in confusion and anger. Humanity was no longer the weak, scattered species he had dismissed. The tides of war had begun to shift, and now, with the ancient technology coming online, the Sarvok were beginning to realize they had underestimated Earth's defenders in a way they could never have imagined. As the fight raged on, humanity's resolve only grew stronger. The Sarvok, confident that their superior technology would crush the human resistance, found themselves increasingly caught off guard. Every attempt to quash Earth's efforts was met with new, unexpected strategies. The more they tried to establish dominance, the more they were frustrated by the unpredictable nature of humanity's resistance. The humans had now begun to fight back in earnest, striking with a coordinated force that the Sarvok hadn't anticipated. The global underground network of resistance groups was stronger than ever, a patchwork of armies united under a common cause. No longer fragmented, humans were now one front, regardless of borders or national lines. The unity of the human race was like a sudden storm, fierce and relentless. Then, amidst the chaos, a shocking broadcast cut through the Sarvok communications system. It was everywhere, on every screen, every monitor, every device. The message came not from any leader or government, but from the heart of the resistance itself. It was a declaration, a final statement that rippled across the planet. The message read, "You have sealed your doom." The Sarvok were momentarily stunned. This wasn't a plea for mercy or an apology. It was an unyielding challenge, a promise of retribution. The message came with a broadcast of images, of humans standing tall, fighting in the streets, reclaiming their cities, and rebuilding what the invaders had destroyed. It was a defiant testament to humanity's spirit and determination. The HFY were perplexed. They had expected fear. They had expected Earth to crumble in the face of their overwhelming power. Instead, they were witnessing an uprising, a powerful, coordinated movement that seemed to grow stronger every day. In the command center of the HFY flagship, Supreme Commander Vornek's face hardened. He had seen countless civilizations fall before him, their populations crushed under the weight of his fleet's might. But this was different. The humans were not just fighting for their lives. They were fighting for their planet, for their future. And with every passing day, they were showing him just how much they were capable of. Vornak knew the time had come to make a choice. He had underestimated humanity from the start, but the message had changed everything. It wasn't just a threat. It was a clear signal that Earth was far more resilient than he could have imagined. The ancient technology now activated on the planet's surface was only adding to the complexity of the situation, and the humans' ingenuity seemed to have no limits. Each day, they found new ways to strike back, using what little they had to counter the superior weaponry of the HFY. But even as Vornak contemplated his next move, the realization hit him. He had no idea what these humans were truly capable of. The final message had ignited something. A fire had been lit within the hearts of the human resistance, and it was no longer a fight for survival. It was a fight to reclaim their world, to take back everything that HFY had tried to steal. The broadcast was now playing on every screen across Earth, and humanity was rising. A new generation of fighters, engineers, and civilians were no longer just trying to stop the HFY. They were actively taking the war to them. The battle lines were being drawn across the planet's surface, and for the first time since the invasion began, the HFY felt the ground beneath their feet tremble. And then, in the midst of the battle, a final realization struck the HFY. The humans, for all their faults, were fighting not just for their homes. They were fighting for something far more powerful: their unity, their shared determination, the very thing that had always made them different from any other species in the galaxy, their indomitable will. With their latest message, humanity had sent a clear signal across the stars. Earth would never kneel. Earth would never surrender. The HFY had sealed their doom, and the war had only just begun. The message had done its job. It was more than just a declaration. It was a spark that ignited something far larger. The human resistance was no longer just a series of disconnected pockets of fighters. It had become a united force, a global movement determined to reclaim Earth, and it was gaining momentum. The resistance groups had grown more organized, more efficient. Every day, they found new ways to take the fight to the HFY. But even with their ingenuity and relentless spirit, humanity still faced a seemingly insurmountable enemy. The HFY's technological superiority was unmatched, or so they thought. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, the ancient defense system had finally come to life. For millennia, it had lain dormant, hidden beneath layers of rock and forgotten by time. But now, after centuries of silence, it was waking up. The power of geothermal energy activated the once-forgotten machines. Ancient mechanisms stirred and hummed with energy, rising from the depths of the Earth. The weapon that had been hidden away was more powerful than anything humanity had ever created. It was a system designed for one purpose: to protect Earth from threats far greater than the HFY. At first, it was just a tremor, a subtle shift in the planet's energy. But soon, the resistance fighters on the ground began to notice strange occurrences. The weather patterns began to change in unexpected ways. The ground vibrated with an intensity that made the human fighters stop and look around in confusion. They had no idea what was happening, but they didn't need to. The ancient technology had been activated, and it was already beginning to turn the tide of the war. In space, the HFY fleet began to experience unexplained malfunctions. Their ships, once thought to be indestructible, began to flicker, their energy shields fluctuating in ways they couldn't control. Their weapons systems started to misfire. Communication scrambled. It was chaos, something they hadn't anticipated. What they didn't know was that the ancient technology was interfering with their highly advanced systems. The weapon beneath the Earth's surface had a direct effect on the Xarvok's technology, scrambling their signals and disabling their ability to function properly. The Xarvok's supreme commander, Vornak, could feel the shift in the atmosphere as soon as it happened. His fleet, which had once been the pinnacle of power in the galaxy, was suddenly vulnerable. He could sense it. A strange force was at work. And though he didn't yet understand it, he knew one thing for certain. The humans had uncovered something ancient, something powerful, and they were using it against him. In the heart of the Resistance Command Center, engineers and scientists scrambled to study the ancient weapon. They were still learning how to harness its full potential, but they knew they had found the key to turning the war in humanity's favor. As the global resistance grew stronger, they began coordinating attacks, using the newfound weapon to target key Xarvok infrastructure. Entire fleets of Xarvok warships were knocked out of orbit as electromagnetic pulses disabled their engines. The Xarvok's once feared ships fell from the sky like wounded birds, their technology no match for the ancient force rising from the earth below. At the same time, the human fighters on the ground continued their guerrilla warfare, striking at vulnerable Xarvok positions with the knowledge that the planet itself was on their side. The tide of the war had begun to turn. The Xarvok, who had once thought themselves invincible, were now retreating, slowly but steadily, from Earth's cities, caught off guard by the sudden shift in power. In the command center, the resistance leaders exchanged glances, knowing they were on the cusp of something monumental. They had been fighting for survival, but now they were fighting for victory. And with the awakening of Earth's ancient weapon, humanity had a real chance at driving the Xarvok off their world for good. But they also knew that the Xarvok wouldn't give up easily. The battle had only intensified, and they were far from winning. However, the message was clear. Humanity had found its strength, and it would not be easily defeated. The fight was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted. The Xarvok had made their first mistake when they underestimated humanity. Now, they were about to realize their greatest error. They had come to a world that would fight back, tooth and nail. And the humans weren't going to stop until Earth was free once again. The war had escalated beyond what either side had ever expected. Humanity's newfound strength, fueled by the awakening of ancient defenses beneath the Earth's surface, was beginning to show the true extent of its power. The once mighty Xarvok fleet, which had hovered above Earth like a storm waiting to strike, was now in disarray. Ships that had once been impervious to human weapons were now crippled, their technology disrupted by forces they couldn't even begin to comprehend. The ancient systems beneath Earth's surface were not just powerful. They were ancient, built for a purpose no one truly understood until now. In the midst of the chaos, Supreme Commander Vornak sat at the heart of his command ship, staring out at the crippled remnants of his fleet. He had commanded countless victories across the galaxy, but this was something he couldn't anticipate. The humans had turned the very world they'd fought for into a weapon, using a force older than the Xarvok themselves. He could feel the frustration building inside him, gnawing at his resolve. His invincible army was beginning to falter, and his carefully calculated invasion was spiraling out of control. The resistance wasn't stopping. Every day they grew bolder, more coordinated. In every corner of the globe, human ingenuity and unity had reached a fever pitch. The makeshift airstrips in the deserts were now home to air units capable of harassing Xarvok reinforcements. In the mountains, squads of fighters launched attacks on enemy supply routes, disabling transport ships and forcing the Xarvok to reconsider their strategy. Vornak's mind raced. He had never experienced a setback like this before. His generals were advising more aggressive tactics, destroy entire cities, crush any resistance. But he knew, deep down, That humanity's resolve had grown too strong. Every attack they made only fueled the human will to fight back. Every loss only sparked a new wave of anger and defiance. And the ancient technology beneath Earth's surface had tipped the balance in their favor. With every passing day, the HFY found themselves losing ground. The once invincible fleet was now a shell of its former self. The humans had discovered how to manipulate the very forces that had protected their planet for millennia. The electromagnetic pulses from Earth's deep core disrupted the HFY's navigation systems, rendered their weapons unreliable, and drained the energy from their shields. The once mighty warships now moved sluggishly, their massive forms vulnerable to human attacks. Even the invaders' most advanced forces, biomechanical soldiers with superior strength and speed, found themselves outmatched in close combat by the determined, resourceful humans. As the war raged on, the humans began to push the HFY forces back, reclaiming city after city. Each victory was a testament to their resilience, and each defeat for the HFY brought them closer to realizing just how dangerous these humans truly were. The invaders who had come to conquer, to subjugate, now faced a reckoning. The humans, who had once been seen as weak and vulnerable, were showing a level of tenacity that the HFY had never encountered. It was no longer just about winning battles. The resistance had evolved into a force that was actively driving the HFY off Earth, and the invaders had no answer for it. The HFY had underestimated the power of unity, the power of a species that would fight to protect their home. In the heart of Earth's resistance, plans were being made to launch a final assault on the HFY flagship. The time had come to end the invasion once and for all. They had the advantage now, and they were determined to seize it. The world's most brilliant minds had come together to devise a plan that would bring the war to its final chapter. As humanity gathered its final resources and prepared for the coming assault, they knew they were not just fighting for Earth's survival, they were fighting for their very future. And as they looked to the stars, they understood one thing. This would be their reckoning too. The HFY would never again be allowed to threaten their home. The final assault was upon them. Humanity's resistance, now a formidable force, had united their best and brightest for one last push to drive the HFY from their world. Every nation, every city that still stood, contributed what it could. The world's military might, combined with the technology derived from the ancient weapon beneath Earth's surface, had created a force that the HFY had underestimated from the very beginning. Across the planet, humans were preparing. Fighter jets roared across the sky, and armies of ground forces assembled in key locations. The survivors from every corner of Earth, soldiers, civilians, scientists, engineers, even farmers, stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The people had become more than just an army. They were a symbol of defiance, a symbol of everything that the HFY had failed to account for. In the heart of the Resistance's command center, an intense silence fell over the room. A diverse group of leaders, military commanders, tech experts, and civilian strategists, pored over final plans, ensuring every detail was in place. They had already made a name for themselves in the battle, but this final strike would be their defining moment. The HFY flagship, hovering over the Pacific Ocean, was the last bastion of the invaders. Its advanced shield systems and fleet of warships made it nearly untouchable, but humanity had learned how to fight back, and they were ready to deliver the final blow. At the front lines, a squadron of fighter pilots, led by Captain Mia Tamsin, prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. Their target was the HFY flagship's control center, the heart of the alien vessel's defenses. The pilots had trained for weeks using makeshift technologies, integrating human ingenuity with the capabilities of Earth's ancient weaponry. It was a risk, a mission that could very well cost them their lives, but they had no choice. They had to disable the flagship's systems once and for all. The command to launch came swiftly. A roar of engines filled the sky as the pilots ascended into the stratosphere. their ships equipped with custom-made electromagnetic disruptors designed to penetrate the Sarvok's advanced shields. The air was thick with tension as they neared the flagship, the colossal ship looming in the distance like a menacing storm cloud. On the ground, human forces were launching their own attacks. In Europe, resistance fighters had gathered in force, storming Sarvok supply bases and cutting off communication lines. In Asia, armies of volunteers set out to overwhelm the alien troops holding key cities. With every strike, humanity pushed forward, inch by inch, determined to send a message they could no longer ignore. Earth was no longer theirs to take. As the pilots closed in on the flagship, Captain Mia's voice crackled over the comms, steady despite the chaos unfolding. "Remember, we're not just taking down a ship," she said. "We're sending a message to the stars. Humanity is not afraid." The squadron maneuvered around Sarvok defenses, their ships zipping through laser fire and debris as they approached the vulnerable core of the alien ship. It was a calculated risk, but they had no other option. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. With seconds to spare, Mia's team released their payloads, sending out powerful electromagnetic pulses that crippled the flagship's energy systems. Inside the flagship, Vornak could feel the tremors as his precious vessel began to shake, its once impenetrable shields faltering. Panic spread among his ranks. The final defensive systems had been breached. The tide had turned. The humans had won. With the flagship's defenses failing, the human forces surged forward. The last few Sarvok warships surrounding Earth's atmosphere were swiftly picked off by ground-based laser systems, and the alien forces left in the cities were overwhelmed by the coordinated counterattacks. Vornak's eyes narrowed, a realization dawning upon him. His greatest mistake had been underestimating the very species he had come to conquer. The humans had turned their desperation into determination, their unity into a weapon that even his advanced technology couldn't combat. Earth was lost to him, and the dream of Sarvok domination was slipping away. But Vornak was not one to surrender easily. The fight was far from over, but the human victory was undeniable. Earth had shown the galaxy that it would never be a place to conquer. It was a world worth fighting for. The final moments of the war were upon them. The once immense Sarvok flagship was now a burning hulk in Earth's atmosphere, its mighty hull slowly crumbling under the force of the human assault. From the command centers of the human resistance, the broadcast screens flickered with images of the falling invaders' fleet, their once pristine ships now reduced to wreckage. The flagship was no longer a looming symbol of their oppression. It was a broken relic of a failed invasion. Vornak stood at the heart of his command vessel, eyes locked on the destruction around him. His empire, which had once stretched across countless systems, had come to an end on a small blue planet in the far corner of the galaxy. He could feel the weight of failure pressing down on him. His forces had been scattered, and his own fleet was in disarray. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had fought back and won. The ancient weapon, once hidden beneath the Earth's surface, had proved to be far more powerful than he had ever imagined. It was the final twist in a war he thought was already decided in his favor. Even as the Sarvok leader absorbed the magnitude of his failure, he knew that the fight wasn't over. The humans had won, but at great cost. The planet, scared by the invasion, lay in ruins. Cities were devastated, and the Earth's ecosystems were in critical condition. The road to recovery would be long and uncertain. Humanity had secured its freedom, but the war had left deep scars. On the ground, the human resistance celebrated their victory, but it wasn't without a sense of solemnity. The streets were filled with survivors, embracing one another, but the overwhelming grief from the lives lost in the battle weighed heavily on their hearts. They had taken back their planet, but they had also witnessed the true cost of war. Entire families had been torn apart, and countless brave souls had given their lives for the cause. Amid the celebration, the leaders of the resistance gathered to discuss the future. Their victory was not an end, but a beginning. The planet would need to rebuild, and the scars of the invasion would take years to heal. But humanity had proved its strength, its ability to unite when faced with impossible odds. They had fought not just for their survival, but for a future, for the generations yet to come. In the weeks that followed, Earth's governments and the Resistance Coalition worked together to chart a course for recovery. With the ancient technology now fully understood, Earth's scientists began to reverse engineer the powerful systems that had protected them. The same energy pulses that had crippled the Xarvox technology now fueled human innovation. What had once been an alien weapon was becoming Earth's greatest asset. Renewable energy sources, once thought impossible, now powered entire cities. The Earth was on its way to recovery, and this time, it would be built by humanity's own hands, fueled by their own strength. Vornak, in the depths of his broken fleet, faced the reality of his failure. The Xarvok had suffered a crushing defeat, and though he had no intention of surrendering, he knew his empire could no longer hope to conquer Earth. The invaders had miscalculated. They had underestimated the spirit of humanity. They had come expecting a quick and easy victory, only to face a people whose determination to protect their home was stronger than any weapon. The final message from Earth echoed across the remnants of the Xarvok fleet, still broadcasting in every language, every corner of the galaxy. You have sealed your doom. The words rang true now, a fitting epitaph for the Xarvok's ill-fated conquest. It was no longer just a declaration. It was a prophecy fulfilled. As Earth began its long journey to recovery, humanity's spirit burned brighter than ever before. They had fought not just to survive, but to thrive. Their unity, their resilience, and their determination had shaped the fate of their world. And as they looked to the future, they knew one thing for certain. Earth was their home, and they would never again let anyone take it from them.